What does it take to create lift in our work, our leadership, and in our lives? In this episode of The Life of Try, I'm talking with Bruce Dorey, a mechanical engineer, coach, and author of Lift and a Whole New Way to Work. Bruce brings an engineer's eye and a storyteller's heart to big questions about how we learn, how we lead, and how we pass along the hard-won wisdom that helps the next person rise. Together, we explore the beauty of craftsmanship, the importance of mentorship, and why business loses something essential when it stops making room for people to teach, practice, and grow together. Bruce also shares how tools like AI, AR, and VR can help us reset, find flow, capture what we're learning, and keep honing our craft in a rapidly changing world. This is a conversation about leadership, learning, awe, and the very human act of helping one another get better. And maybe that's where lift really begins. Not inside any one of us, but in the powerful intersection between who we are and what we're practicing and the people who help us rise. Hi, Bruce.
Hello there.
It's so good to talk to you. You are a mechanical engineer by education and trade. And I'm wondering, is that why you were able to create frameworks from your books? You know, first for passing down knowledge and lift, and then for maximizing productivity and finding flow in a whole new way to work?
I think so. Lift, the first book, is a mechanical engineering metaphor. This idea of lift. I always thought that was the coolest thing. You're an engineer, so you get this, right? There's four natural forces on the planet, only four. Gravity, electromagnetism, and then the two small forces of atoms. And then there's lift, which is like a really powerful force used every day all over the world, and pretty well misunderstood. But the idea I had with lift was that lift doesn't exist inside of a wing. Like there's no lift in a wing. The lift exists when a wing encounters the air, the atmosphere. And I use the metaphor of lift and leadership, that leadership doesn't exist in somebody's head any more than lift exists in a wing. Leadership exists at the intersection of a person and an environment. And each of them takes a certain amount of tweaking to get right. And you got to keep getting it right.
Right. And so when you say lift is used all over the world, you're talking about really the miracle of flight and airplanes, right? Yeah. And
Airplanes, flight,
yeah.
sailing, all that stuff.
Yes, right. I love how you talk about that intersection being necessary to create the lift. Because you were identifying the problem that we're not passing down our knowledge in business from one generation to the next.
And I worked for a big company. I worked for a Fortune 100 company. And I remember this was before I got into coaching and all that stuff. So this was sort of early in my career. And I remember somebody talking to me about mentoring, and they were the mentor. And I said, well, what's mentor? Like, what do you guys do? And he said, it's kind of like I take somebody to lunch. I have to do it once a month. So I take them to lunch. Then I walk them around the building a couple of times. Then I'm done. I check the box. And I thought I did a lot of sports growing up, and there's a lot of mentoring in sports. I played a lot of tennis, particularly, and there's a lot of mentoring in that. I wasn't that great, but I tried hard. And really good mentoring is really, really necessary. And we don't do it in business, not anymore. And I blame Frederick Winslow Taylor.
Tell me why you blame Frederick Winslow Taylor.
Good old Fred. He was Fred Taylor before he created the time and motion study stuff that he did. And he was like the first management consultant, and he basically helped Henry Ford come up with this brilliant idea that said you want to break down all business into its smallest component, which requires no skill, no talent, and the lowest cost. And that way you can interchange people. But that idea went around the idea of craftsmanship, which is the essence of one of the things I really love to talk about and think about, that the idea of this master to the journeyman to the apprentice model. it's just so ingrained in who we are. It was until maybe the 20th century. And then in the 1900s, we got away from that. And certainly, in the 1940s and 50s, 60s, it was gone. It was, the era of the corporation and General Mills, General Food, General Electric, General
Yeah.
everything. And they didn't do anything in particular. They just did everything and bought up conglomerates. And it just got rid of what I still think is like the most beautiful structure, which is, as I said, this master to the apprentice model, not
Hmm.
just for the trade, but
Right.
for developing as a person, understanding responsibility and
Hmm.
getting along with people and all that stuff.
Well,
That
and
that that to me.
negotiate. Yeah, and you made a great point about negotiations, right? It's such a complex interaction. I mean, you had so many great examples, but it's funny. I was thinking about it yesterday because I was standing at a table with my kids, and so I got the table ready, and I got the brushes out, and I was teaching them how to do the brush strokes and how not to make drips, and I was thinking about we just do this over and over again. It's part of being human to pass our knowledge on. And I'm not master stainer by any chance, but we do that again and again. And when we're robbed of it within our business environments, it shortchanges us on both sides.
100%. 100%. Because kids learn by watching you and then they mimic you. And it's all the little things like how do you relate to people that aren't catching on as fast? How do you relate to people that are not paying attention? How do you relate to people who are doing really well? And all of that stuff to me is like central to being human. But I will say, and I know you've traveled a lot too, I've had the good fortune of spending time in Europe. So I spent 5 years in France, and I'm by no means an artist, but I love to look at it. I love to go to museums and stuff. And every one of them had a guild that they were part of. You take Rodin, for example. I lived in Paris about a block and a half from Rodin's now gallery is. It's just a house. It's a beautiful house. But he didn't do a lot of his stuff. He basically had this team of people that he coached essentially. And they, it was casting and he did the initial structure of it,
Right.
but then they poured the brass in it and they crafted this. And he really trained like hundreds of people to do this. And Da Vinci's the same way. All the greats, the Impressionists, not as much, but still quite a bit. They didn't do any of the basic stuff. They taught people to do the brushes, to clean them, to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you had to do all that stuff um, before you painted.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I love that you offer some hope in Lyft because you say, and I'll quote from it, Richards, Florida's research offers us some hope. He points out that the creative class has grown from just 12% in the population of the 1800s to 32.6% in 2012. And I love that because I love that you're talking about that creative class and say more about.
Yeah. The gig economy. I was talking about this yesterday to somebody that the revival of the gig economy is a good thing. People get freedom from the office, that whole kind of structure of not
Right.
working when you work, having jobs at general something where you go to work and you don't go to work and you hate working. And work is about but you actually do something you enjoy doing and then you learn how and why it's important to kind of get better and better at it and then you learn how to do that. And for me that whole gig economy has taught us um really, like, we've really returned to something that I think is important, which is the
Mhm.
craftsman model. And that's where my next book's coming in, right? The idea of the digital bell, where using AI now. So AI is a really great master in some ways. I don't mean it in this Orwellian way. I mean it in that you can have it help you learn and retain knowledge without a big staff and without having to be part of a guild or anything, because getting into a guild is not easy and it's not as prevalent as it was. And you can use AI to help you remember stuff and help you remember to do stuff and remind you of what worked and remind you of what you did in the past in your craft that was working.
So it sort of helps you specialize, gives you that access to the information that you need to keep upping your game. Am I?
Yeah. The idea is that you're learning stuff and kind of like tribal knowledge. When I do this, this really works, but you forget it. And unless you have a way of capturing it, you can capture it with notebooks and stuff like that, or that's what they used to do. But now you can capture it with audio recording and have AI help you capture it too. And where I use AI and where I think AI is really, really useful is telling you how you did in your day and getting away from the craft. You get it if you're in a meeting, for example. Those meeting transcripts are pretty cool. Like, I think AI to evaluate how you did versus what you're committed to. Like, if you say, I want to be a little more outspoken in this meeting and I want to not back down when John pushes me and on
Right.
something, I want to, say my piece, or I want to talk about this because I think it's really important, and you don't do it, AI can help you get there. Say, hey, you really sidestepped this and you violated your 70-30 talk ratio, which you said you were going to do. And I think that is a way of using it without a big team, without a big staff, which is really hard these days, to kind of help you get ahead, make progress,
honing your
make progress.
craft. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you talk a lot about technology in A Whole New Way to Work. I mean, I'm going to quote from your book, A Whole New Way to Work. You write, the true potential of AR, which is augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality, isn't rooted in their ability to create entirely new worlds, but in their power to transform how we perceive and engage with the world we already inhabit. Which is,
Yes.
I haven't used a lot of AR or VR, so you're going to have to tell me more about how it helps us transform and find flow. And
I don't know if you can see these.
uh-huh.
These are my Quest Pro 2s.
Yeah.
I use them every day. So for me, it helps me relax, number one. And so I like to take breaks. I'm trying really hard not to multitask in life. I'm trying to really I'm going to work really hard for 45 minutes. Then I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to take a 20-minute break, and I do a VR break. And you can go into a meadow, for example, or you can climb a mountain. You climb mountains. I don't climb mountains. So, or you could, for me, I know this sounds crazy, but I like to, there's a thing there where you go in the space station that's circling the Earth, and you just can sit there for 20 minutes and circle the Earth, and you go over the different continents, and it's just so relaxing and so quiet. And I just find that when I come back, when I take them off and I get back to work, I am refreshed and I am more, present to kind of what's going on.
Right.
That's one of the ways I use it. I think the other way is I'm fortunate because I live on a lake in northern Ontario in Canada right now for part of the year. So I can go outside and there are trees, but a lot of the year I live in Texas, Dallas, and there's not a lot of trees where I live. And I can put on the headset and I can go into a treed environment, hang around, walk around, and get the advantages of, it's called biophilia. And there's really good evidence that says that makes you feel better. And it actually shoots off neurotransmitters and all that stuff. And I just feel better, and I feel more like somebody that I want to be around other people, and I want to talk to people, and I'm just more myself, and I'm not as kind of angry with everything.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about a lot of science in your book, and one of the things that you mentioned specifically related to that I loved was Dr. Keltner's work on the power of awe.
Yeah.
And how you can bring that in.
Yeah, that is remarkable, because that's such an underused thing. I don't mean to be trite, but what is it about a sunset that's so moving to many of in its own way. When you sit there and you get a chance to really hang out in a beautiful sunset or uh or a garden or whatever that might be, your baby looking into the eyes of your child, your newborn, or whatever that is that inspires awe is such a powerful thing in life. I don't know what you call it really.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about nature. I mean, we talk about that sort of reset, right? That sense of you're participating in something bigger than yourself, maybe.
Right, right. I wish I had a better way of saying it other than reset is a great way to say it, or reframing it so that you get out of the day-to-day
Yeah.
morass and you can. That's another reason I just realized it. That's another reason I love that the Meta app where you're circling the globe and this spaceship and you realize you're just one of little guys down there, and there's billions of us, and
Right.
my problems aren't so big. They are my
Right.
problems, but there's a lot of people, and my
Yeah.
problems aren't, they're just tiny, and I'm just a tiny little guy on this planet. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it again, it just kind of pulls me out of the morass, out of the mud.
Yeah. Well, and you write in your book. Thirdly, there's an area of creativity, play, and collaboration with AR and VR that I call connection. Here you leverage your creative, collaborative, and leadership strengths and gain motivation from the experiences of mastery, autonomy, and connection evoked in this area.
Yeah, and what I'm talking about is playing games.
Yeah.
Playing video games are awesome. I'm no master of them, but you can really get lost in some of these games. The technology, when you go in these things, they're just remarkable how you just really get immersed in the environment, and you can spend 2 hours in there and you improve your level and you get better at something. And it's not about shooting and killing. It's about,
Yeah.
getting through this or getting that over this maze or figuring out how to get through this passageway, and you just feel good it's that experience of getting better at something, which is really cool.
And you talk about AR and VR pushing our boundaries, helping us change and transform, truly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think TV was all that different, or radio was all that different. I mean, people used to say bad things about radio, that it was
Right.
unnatural, and but you could make the case for all kinds of new technology, but this is a new technology, in my opinion, that's just a step function above everything, because you can interact with it. It's not a lean back in your chair, turn off your mind, watch TV. It's not a veg thing. You got to lean into these games. You got to learn. You got to think, strategize,
Right.
plan, and it really evokes this experience of getting better at something. Like, you can really achieve something. There's a lot of books written about this by very smart people.
Yeah, well, including you, I would say,
Well,
and you are a really good storyteller. You introduce the behavioral research both in Lift, which talks about passing on our metis. Am I saying that right? Right,
yeah, metas, yeah.
and honing our craft and going back to that craftsman model and passing that on from generation to generation, as well as a whole new way to work. You interweave your own personal story, but in a Lift, you introduce the story of Miracle on the Hudson, which was
Yeah,
flight 1549. Am I right?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Sully. Yeah.
Sully landing in the Hudson River, and in a whole new way to work, you interweave a character that's the amalgamation of Alex Lowe and Alex Honnold into your story. Tell me why you chose stories to help tell these.
Sure. Well, I start the book Lift with something, to me, is a really important thing, that as a pilot, when you hand over control, you say, it's your airplane. So that's how I start the whole thing. It's your airplane. And that sort of metaphorically is what Sully is doing to the second in command. So the SIC sits there, and he sits there for hours and hours and hours, just watching the pilot. That second in command is kind of this idea of passing the craft. And the craft is landing an airplane when the computer says it ain't going to work. And everybody says, like, he's going to die. And he makes it. There's all these people who, after the fact, that they say all these things that he just got lucky. And this guy did something really, really remarkable that it just took a long time to learn. Like, you had to do things that were really counter to what maybe a young pilot would think. Like, he had to sort of like put the nose down and get some acceleration so he could lift the nose back up again. And a lot of really profound things that experience teaches you. You know, I were talking about earlier, when you're gripped in the fear of climbing a mountain, crashing in an airplane, your flight takes over if you don't have the experience to say, okay, take a deep breath, like Alex Honnold has to do every once in a while, right? Take a deep breath. Okay, just the breathing exercises or whatever that is. You just have to learn to do that. I thought Honnold and Alex Lowe, God rest his soul, was just these are people who, in my opinion, they don't talk about being masters. They just go out and do it. They're not posting pictures of themselves. They're just up there doing it because, like, Honnold lived in a van and did what he did because he loved to do it. He really didn't care if he became a superstar, which he's a big star now. You know, he gets $1 million just to show up at events and stuff like that. He didn't want any of that necessarily. He just wanted to climb, and he still does. If you hear him talk, he's like, "Yeah, I just want to find good mountains."
Yeah. Well, what I love about both those stories, both the pilot world, where there is a convention for passing on that knowledge, for both honing your craft and passing it on.
Yeah.
But also, I know very well in the climbing world, climbers pass on their knowledge to other climbers, whether it's a guide to a client, or you can see this in Free Solo with Alex Honnold, climbing with Tommy Caldwell. They do it over and over again. They just pass on that knowledge of, well, you know, you could do the nose this way or you could do it that way. But there's a huge culture of sharing that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I'm talking about. And that experience, so again, you know, it's stretching the metaphor perhaps, but it lifts up the other person. They feel better, you know, they feel like it's possible, and they feel like what was really hard. A really good coach will tell you the truth. They're like, I'm scared too, you know, but here's what you got to do, or here's part of being a great mentor is creating path that's easier for the next generation, not harder, and more possible.
Right. You've given us so many ideas about how to lift others, how to use technology to break through the chains of our routines and pass on that knowledge and hone our craft. So thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your books.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Wynne.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Bruce Dorey. I love the way Bruce helps us see that lift doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in the meeting place between who we are, the environments we move through, the tools we use, and the people who take the time to teach us what they've learned along the way. If this episode has you thinking about your own craft, how you learn, how you reset, and how you keep growing, I hope you'll take one small idea from Bruce and try it this week. Maybe it's creating space for awe. Maybe it's using technology more intentionally. Maybe it's passing along a bit of hard-won wisdom to someone who could use a little lift. And if you'd like to keep exploring how we recover our energy and create more sustainable growth, I recommend listening to my Life of Try episode with Dr. Mike Rucker, How to Overcome Burnout and Build an Upward Spiral of Growth, Fun, and Resilience. In that conversation, Mike shares why fun, connection, and renewal and restorative practices aren't distractions for growth. They can be essential parts of building resilience and moving forward with more creativity and joy. As always, thanks for being here on The Life of Try, a place for stories, conversations, and reminders that growth often begins with one simple choice: to try. Until next time, keep noticing what gives you lift, keep practicing what matters, and keep trying.